bread truly built civilization. People were able to focus on other things because they could obtain their calories fairly easily and store them. But the bread most people eat today interacts with two systems in your body at the same time: your blood sugar system and your gut barrier and immune system. The strange part is that the problem isn't wheat itself. The problem is what we did to the wheat. For most of human history, food was a daily emergency. Your entire day revolved around one question: where is the next meal coming from? Thousands of years ago, humans began growing wheat. Wheat mattered because it could be stored. It could survive through winter and endure a bad harvest. And for the first time, calories became predictable. Once calories became predictable, everything else followed. People stayed in one place. Communities formed, skills accumulated, and knowledge passed from one generation to the next instead of resetting each time. But here is the turning point. The wheat most people eat today is not the wheat that built civilizations. Early bread was simple. People crushed whole wheat grains with stones, added water, and waited. Natural fermentation happened whether they planned it or not. Sometimes it took hours, sometimes days. As farming expanded, people began selecting wheat plants that produced more grain, survived colder climates, and stored well. Over time, different wheat plants merged together. Modern bread wheat became a genetic mixture of 3 different wheat plants. One of those plants introduced new types of proteins that humans had rarely eaten before, known as glutens and gliadins. Then food manufacturing changed wheat again. A wheat grain has 3 major parts: the bran, which contains most of the fiber; the germ, which holds vitamins, minerals, and healthy fats; and the starchy center. The bran and germ also contain oils. Those oils spoil over time. To prevent this, industrial flour production removes those oils. What remains is mostly starch and protein. This flour lasts longer, travels further, and works perfectly in baking machines without all that smelly oil. But your body interacts with it very differently. And that is where the 2 biological effects begin. The first effect is blood sugar. Think about an orange. If you drink orange juice, your blood sugar rises quickly because the natural structure of the fruit has been broken apart. When you eat a whole orange, it behaves differently. The fiber is still there, but more importantly, the structure of the fruit is still intact. The fiber has not been disintegrated. That structure slows digestion. Think of it this way. Imagine a log of wood compared to that same log turned into sawdust. Same material, very different behavior. Your body digests sawdust much, much faster. The same thing happens with wheat. The more the grain is refined, ground, rebuilt, and pasted back together, the faster your body turns it into sugar. Even many store-bought whole wheat breads behave almost like white bread. If you want bread that behaves more like traditional wheat, keep the grain closer to its natural form. Buy whole wheat berries and grind them yourself using a small home grain mill. Bake the bread from that freshly ground flour, ground into larger chunks rather than a fine powder. Fresh flour still contains the bran and germ. The fibers are more intact and digestion slows down. Bread made this way can raise blood sugar much less than most commercial breads, if not all. It is not perfect, but it is closer to the form people historically ate. That is the first biological effect, blood sugar. Now let us move to the second one. This one can be a little strange. First of all, your gut lining is not a solid wall. It has to be able to absorb nutrients from the food you eat, so it behaves more like a screen door. Small nutrients are supposed to pass through, but large fragments are not. That door can open wider than it should. The signal that loosens the hinges is a protein. One of the key proteins, the most well-known, is called zonulin, and we will talk about that a little later. Earlier, I used the phrase gluten and gliadin proteins. That wording matters. What most people casually call gluten is actually a mixture of proteins. 2 of the main groups are glutenins and gliadins. The fragments that most often interact with the gut barrier come from gliadin, one part of gluten. This also helps explain why so many people say they do not have gluten problems. Classic celiac disease is actually relatively rare, but non-celiac wheat sensitivity is far more common and often never diagnosed. In many of these cases, the reaction involves gliadin fragments That protein group interacts with the gut barrier, and the reaction can take not only hours but days. As you can understand, many, if not most mild wheat reactions never get connected to what was causing them, the gliadin protein. And they are not a full autoimmune disease. They are more of an allergy type of reaction. Certain gliadin fragments can interact with the gut lining and trigger the release of zonulin. What is zonulin? Zonulin is that protein I mentioned a few minutes ago that loosens the hinges of the gut barrier. When that happens, the barrier opens wider and does not carefully check what passes through. Gliadin fragments can pass through. Food fragments pass through. Bacterial pieces pass through. Even substances we do not fully understand yet can pass through. And if all of that sounds like a justification for the term leaky gut, and you think leaky gut is not real, so did most of the rest of the world. Until a researcher in the basement of the University of Maryland in Baltimore, an Italian gastroenterologist named Alessio Fasano, was working alone in that little basement and discovered the genetics behind it, the amino acid sequences behind the proteins. He discovered this entire process. Now he is at Harvard leading a $50 million zonulin research project. This is real. It is not made up. So let us return to the substances passing through the gut. Just the passing through the gut can make people feel unwell even without classic celiac disease. But opening the gut barrier is really only part of the story. Once fragments cross that barrier, the immune system reacts. Some people's immune systems react much more strongly to these fragments than others. When that happens, immune cells release chemicals designed to kill germs. Those chemicals are powerful and can also damage nearby tissue. You may recall the danger associated with soft plaque and inflammation, that it is our own immune system causing it. In other words, we are taking friendly fire. The same thing is happening here. You are taking friendly fire from your immune system, but it is coming from substances passing through your gut that should not be passing through. Your body has normal cleanup systems that repair damage, but some people have a genetic pattern that makes cleanup less efficient. Here is where things line up in a surprising way. The same genetic pattern that allows the gut barrier to open more easily than it should can also make it harder for the body to clean up the damage afterward. Two people can eat the same bread and have very different biological reactions. A growing number of people are now being diagnosed with non-celiac wheat sensitivity. In these cases, wheat fragments appear to open the intestinal barrier and allow substances to enter the bloodstream that normally stay inside the gut. That can trigger low-level inflammation. People will not immediately recognize this. For some individuals, genetic factors make that reaction stronger or longer lasting. Some people turn to ancient wheat varieties because they notice something is off and say, maybe I will try something like einkorn wheat. Einkorn lacks the extra genetic changes found in modern wheat. Because of that, einkorn appears to contain fewer of the hardest to digest gliadin fragments. Studies suggest einkorn may contain 40 to 50% fewer problematic fragments. That can help many people, but it does not eliminate the issue completely. The only reliable way to greatly reduce harmful glutens and gliadin fragments is to break them apart intentionally. That requires protein-cutting enzymes. Some bakeries use long fermentation along with these protein-cutting enzymes to break gluten down before the bread is ever eaten. At that point, the process actually looks far less like a traditional baking operation and much more like food chemistry. So the bread may be safer, but it looks like it is coming out of a chemical plant. This can also be done at home in a different way. Certain enzymes can be added to the dough and allowed to work through fermentation. Given enough time, they will break the gluten proteins apart before the bread is baked. And if you cannot control how the bread is made, there are other options. You can obtain digestive enzyme supplements designed to break down gluten and gliadins in the stomach. These products are widely available even on platforms like Amazon. They are not as thorough as breaking down gliadins during the baking process, but they do reduce the amount that reaches the small intestine, where this problem is occurring. When humans first started growing wheat, the goal was not optimization, convenience, or storage for industrial operations. It was simply survival. Wheat worked because it was simple, slow to digest, and close to its natural form. And that version of wheat helped stabilize early human societies. The version most people eat today is far faster, far less fermented, and far more refined. It is engineered for large-scale food production, and it interacts with the body in two important ways. It affects blood sugar, and it can affect the gut barrier and the immune system. Civilization began when humans learned how to make calories predictable. Wheat made that possible. But understanding how modern wheat interacts with the body may be one of the most important nutrition questions of our time, because the food that helped build this civilization has quietly become something very different. Source: this text is translated from a transcript of a video presented by Ibrahimbeck, based on a discussion of scientific information regarding how modern wheat interacts with the human body, particularly its effects on blood sugar and the gut barrier. The scientific foundations referenced in the text draw partly on the Zonulin research conducted by Dr. Alessio Fasano at Harvard University and historical information about the origins of bread.